Welcome to episode 9 of the Minds Capital podcast, the show devoted to the growing world of independent sponsorship and deal-by-deal private equity. I'm Will Smith, here with my partners in Minds Capital, Nicholas James and Max Lummis. Today's episode is with the sponsor Ben Hughes of Blue Ridge Construction Capital. He is a sponsor laser-focused on a particular niche, which is a big theme of today's episode. Let's talk a little bit about what we thought. Nicholas, what grabbed you about our conversation with Ben today?
This episode is about fleshing out the value of being specialized and having industry expertise, something that Ben has, incredible expertise within the building products niche. So this is what he calls the multiplier effect, and he goes into depth about the benefits of being specialized, which I very much subscribe to. I think he's right, and I think overall, the independent sponsor world has moved from 10 years ago, it was enough in the lower middle market to be a little bit of a generalist. That differentiated you because there weren't that many buyers for these companies. But today, in order to find good deals or in order to be able to pay a premium, be competitive, you need to have an edge. And that edge is very visible if it is vertical industry expertise. So we talk a lot about that. But the one thing that I learned in this episode that I want to highlight, it was counterintuitive to me, which was when Ben highlighted that being an independent sponsor actually makes it easier to invest in cyclical industries. My initial thinking was that, a fund, committed capital would be better suited to invest in cyclical industries because it's at their discretion. If you have a fund, you're going to do 10, 15 deals. It's at your discretion which deals you actually do once you have the blank pool fund behind you. On the other hand, you have independent sponsors who have to raise capital on a deal-by-deal basis. So raising capital for something that is inherently cyclical is going to be very challenging. All of this is probably true, but what is also true is that a fund has a very strict timeline. And this is what Ben highlights, right? Because an independent sponsor can enter into a deal with a great amount of flexibility also on the timeline. And they can sell a deal as, hey, it's cyclical. We believe in the long-term trends. We can hold it as long as we want to. And so they can be able to attract capital despite the cyclicality. So that was something I learned. I never really thought about it from that angle before. And it's another feather in the hat for the independent sponsor model.
Yeah. What grabbed you, I think, Nicholas, same thing as me, is how the flexibility of the independent sponsor model paired with industry focus, they really just complement each other so well to the point that you just made. Another example of that is when he talks about pairing, when he finds a deal and pairing it with strategic capital. So because you're going deal by deal, when you find a deal, you're not just going to use the dry powder you already have. You're going to go out and find capital providers that can provide strategic value into that particular deal. So again, the flexibility of deal by deal really working nicely with a really tight industry focus. Max, what'd you think?
I agree with everything you guys just said. The specialization is the theme of the episode. And as the independent sponsor market becomes more of a perfect, more competitive market, as all markets move towards, specialization is going to be key. I think Ben and Blue Ridge have built a really solid team that's super focused. They have good contacts in the industry. They know what they're looking at. One thing that jumped out to me in addition to that was that Ben and his group built out a team before they really even had a deal. They spent the money, they invested, and really they kind of treat their independent sponsor company as more like a traditional private equity group, in the sense that they have a really solid team and they've got resources, and they've had that since the beginning of the enterprise. So it sounds like it allowed them to be more focused, to manage more deals, to present better to sellers and other capital providers. So they didn't take a salary for a while when they started Blue Ridge, and I think that investment has really paid off for them and has differentiated them in a very niche space, and it's been to their advantage.
He has that great line that he heard from a capital provider that was, if if we're ever going to do a deal in building products, it's going to be with you guys. So they've really set out to be these sponsors that own this category, and any capital that might want to invest in this category would go through them. And it seems like they've made a lot of progress to that end.
And, this is also an example of a sponsor that has scaled quite a bit in not a lot of time. I think they're 2.5 years in, and they've deployed $100 million of equity, which is a lot for any sponsor. And this is across, I believe, 4 platforms.
Well, let's hear it. Please enjoy this interview with Ben Hughes of Blue Ridge Construction Capital. Welcome to Meeting of the Minds, your connection to the growing world of independent sponsors and deal-by-deal private equity. We are your hosts, Will Smith and Nicholas James.
Imagine that you have worked as an investment banker for 13 years. Imagine that during your time as a banker, you focused 100% on one industry. Imagine everything you have learned. You have seen hundreds of transactions. You know all the valuations. You know all the attractive subcategories. You know all the great entrepreneurs, board members, and CEO candidates. You know all the private equity players and strategic buyers. You know all the investors and family offices who like the space. You know all the common pitfalls. You know how to talk to business owners. You know how to add value. Enter Ben Hughes, partner at Blue Ridge Construction Capital. Blue Ridge was founded in 2022 to acquire and grow great businesses in the building products industry. Ben and his co-founder swiftly completed 2 transactions and have since acquired 2 more platforms, bringing the total equity deployed to $100 million in 2.5 years. Ben, great to have you here with us. Since you're so focused on building products, do you ever get FOMO about stuff that happens outside of this space?
Well, first off, before I get into that, thank you for having me. It's a real honor to kind of share the story of Blue Ridge and been following you guys for a while. So really excited to be on this. The FOMO question, short answer, not really. I think there's immense satisfaction and really focusing in on one industry and becoming an expert there. In my mind, our niche focus allows us to bring real value to our portfolio companies and ultimately to our investors. We know the space deeply. We know its value drivers. We know the common pitfalls, the best practices. So all that said, I respect generalists. It's just not our playbook.
And Ben, given that I think it's fair to say most independent sponsors are more generalist than specialist, why do you think that is? Why have you all chosen industry specialization where so many others go broader?
It's a really good question. I think it ultimately comes down to keeping that funnel as wide as possible, is why people tend to go down the generalist path and really focused on finding a deal. For us, I think we wanted to tackle it a little bit differently, in which we would narrowly focus in an area that we know well, and become, leverage that deep domain expertise and that industry network to really get traction early with companies and be viewed as a differentiated investor and partner.
And so differentiation aside in the value proposition there, which is going to be self-explanatory to most people, the actual day-to-day of being a specialized independent sponsor, industry-focused sponsor versus a generalist, do you think that is the actual work different, the day-to-day different?
I would think it's less stressful, to be honest. I'm not spending my time getting smart on the industry, understanding the competitive landscape, understanding who the ultimate buyers are, what are the drivers like we have, and understand all that, so I can focus all my time on the business and our strategy and executing our strategy instead of trying to get smart on the industry or getting caught off caught off guard. So to me, it just eliminates a lot of things and simplifies a lot of things that I don't have to focus on a day in and day out basis that a generalist who doesn't have that experience in the sector might have to get up to speed on.
Everything is probably a bit accelerated. You don't need to research and start from a standstill in a new industry. You don't need to start from a standstill in figuring out the other smart people in the industry to establish contacts with and get on the phone. You can just move more quickly. Probably everything from knowledge to contacts to deal making. I mean, the whole thing is probably feels a little bit sped up compared to people who are coming into an industry for the first time.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think that's an advantage and something when we're talking to potential sellers and trying to get that door in early. We can establish credibility really early with them, and ultimately, do our due diligence more quickly. They can have more confidence that, hey, we're not going to get spooked by some macro factor or something about that industry that may turn off others. They'll have the confidence that we can diligence that and that we understand that coming into it. And so, just for us, it really allows us to really just focus on the opportunity of that business, what really makes that business different in an industry that we know really well. And then how do we go about executing on that growth strategy?
And is it really well defined what is a building products opportunity for you? Do you know immediately when you see an opportunity from the first paragraph, this applies to us versus not? Or are there a lot of opportunities that are more in the gray zone? And how do you go about evaluating those then?
Yeah, that is actively evolving for us. So Nicholas, that's a great question. I think that the short answer is we are transitioning more to that gray zone. We have and one of the big pieces I think, honestly, about being specialized versus being a generalist is that discipline. And so I think when we were starting off, we really spent a lot of time defining our investment strategy, what makes it a Blue Ridge deal, and to be consistent and true and disciplined to that strategy. I think first and foremost, it requires checking kind of two boxes for us, which is one, it needs to be a subsegment within building products that we have specific experience in. And then the second box is we needed an ability to kind of immediately tap into our industry network. And so if we can check those two boxes, then we really start to get into our investment strategy. And that's where I think we're trying to start to evolve a little bit more into that gray area around things that in terms of the company specific attributes and looking and focusing there, we may know an industry, have experience in that industry, might have some negative bias towards that industry where we would have probably earlier on dismissed it. I think now we're kind of transitioning to focus on, okay, well, can this company be an outperformer and really focusing on the attributes of that company to be an attractive investment for us, maybe in a sector that historically has not been one that we're super excited around.
Because I take building products to mean any kind of material that goes into a construction project, right? So what are the materials a home builder needs to construct these buildings? But when we've talked recently, you've been talking about entering the building services industry, for instance. And as an example, you would have electrical installation. Any home needs electricians to set it up. But that's not delivering products, it's delivering services. Is that a gray zone opportunity for you?
No, that's a good point. And we, by the way, you need to connect us with several of the folks that have been on the podcast. They all sound like they could be interesting opportunities. Y'all have spent a lot of time in and around this sector. When we say building products, it's pretty broad. Our experience as investment bankers when we were covering building products was really broad. We covered manufacturing, distribution services. We covered residential, commercial infrastructure in terms of in markets. So when you really take a step back, what we spent time around is a huge market when you think about all the different products and services that go into residential construction, commercial construction, infrastructure construction. That is, a massive portion of the GDP. So while we're specialists, our funnel is still pretty wide. So to the point on kind of investing within services, it's an area we know well. And I think where we're able to be really different and value add partners there is that we understand the supply chain, right? So we'll have, if we're on the service side, we may have relationships on the distribution side. We may understand the OEMs in that model, or have experience or even know the ownership there. So we're kind of able to evaluate and diligence the entire supply chain, or have connectivity in that supply chain, again, to just figure out where and how we can add value kind of day one. So for example, on the garage door services industry, we didn't necessarily, that's the services industry, and it's obviously highly fragmented. But we knew that the customer base, in that the particular investment we made in Banco, they have a mix of installation. We know the home builders well, and then we also know and have experience transacting around the garage door OEM side. So we knew the OEM dynamics and just kind of their behavior. It's a pretty consolidated industry, and so it allowed us to kind of answer a lot of diligence questions on some of the things that were going on with that investment, and bring comfort for us and our investors, just given our experience there.
And so you had told me before that if you don't have track record when you start as an independent sponsor, you need to have specialization, a sector focus in your case, in order to build credibility to execute on your first deal. But now that you've built some track record, you have 4 deals, you've deployed $100 million of equity, which is a lot for a new independent sponsor in less than 3 years. Is that the reason you guys can now cast a wider net? And then as you're casting a wider net, it sounds like you guys are transitioning from being, we were the bankers, we did deals in this space. But now as operators, we've gotten to know the OEMs and the home builders directly. And now we're looking at other opportunities of servicing those people or working with these people that we are now working with. Is that how you've seen the evolution has been for Blue Ridge?
Yeah, there's, I think, yes, we've seen some of the evolution face that way. It's, coming into this, I knew we knew there was going to be a multiplier effect to it, right? As you specialize and build out that network, or you go and invest in this particular business, right? It's gonna give you ideas to think through in other industries and allow you to cast that wider net. So as we've kind of been on the investment side for 3 years, we are seeing a multiplier effect there, and we're seeing that, I would say, increase each year that we progress into this. Just as we gain that experience, gain kind of that real level of insight to what's actually going on kind of at the ground level, and able to leverage those insights and those experiences and think about investing in categories that weren't necessarily obvious to us before, or necessarily viewed as attractive before. I was going back to kind of my comments a few minutes ago. So it's just, by staying specialized, it just allows you to kind of build certain investment themes and go deeper into those investment themes that we wouldn't necessarily have thought of before. Again, going to the garage door example, this is, to me, a really good example. The garage door business that we invested in was more heavily new construction, residential new construction focused versus repair and remodel. You've seen a lot of private equity interest in the garage door services sector, mostly focused on the repair and remodel. Most people would have, if the residential new construction exposure was over a certain amount, they would walk away. We had a little bit of an different thesis thinking about that. As we thought about it, right, we saw that as real opportunity. We had a theme around where we think residential new construction trends are going and the tailwinds behind that, which was a little bit of a contrarian view. And so we saw that as a real opportunity for us to come in to a situation that, as the owners that we ultimately ended up partnering with us, was a huge breath of fresh air to come in, that they weren't having to defend why they were serving residential new construction, but rather us coming in and be like, yeah, we get it. We love that. We love that you're bringing this professionalized model to these builders that are multi-billion-dollar, national-focused, professionalized organizations. You're bringing a professionalized service and able to serve them at scale. Like, what a great way to continue to grow with those customers into new markets. And so it's just kind of thinking through that box. And so using that as an example, we've now been starting to think about, okay, well, what are other categories we can think about, within new construction, on this services side, where people tend to be less focused and therefore less competitive.
Ben, I'm going to be the annoying voice that you just described, that your owners are always having to defend being in the construction space. So what, just broadly, for people who most people who feel like construction is just too cyclical to play in, you come to this world because you have deep expertise here, deep Rolodex, as we've already talked about. But there must be, you've kind of already touched on the fact that you must have some insights about the cyclicality. Is it just that you've gotten comfortable with it? You think in longer terms where the cyclicality ends up kind of smoothing out, or, you're in for long enough cycles that it matters less. How have you built a business in a notoriously cyclical category where that is a feature that private equity just always gets spooked by?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, and I'll get into that on the capital raising, just how you right. tackle that. The beauty of this is we're in the lower middle market, so the businesses that we're focusing on tend to be more regionally focused, and those in markets, they're local, right? What's going on in Dallas, Texas, is very different in terms of construction activity than what's going on up in New York, right? It's very macro driven, and it's all data that you can kind of track and see. And so, the businesses that we're investing in tend to be, as I said, regionally focused, and so we're really able to narrow in on what are the driving factors at those markets that they're serving. Are there tailwinds? Are there headwinds? And get comfort, or not have comfort, around what's going on there. But we tend to invest. We've got 3 businesses that are all in Florida. So we're obviously heavily long Florida, just given all the population growth there that's been going on. It's an undersupplied market. So there's just to your point, a longer term need for construction activity to occur there. So, for us, it's about finding those right regions. I started my career in building products investment banking in 2007. So I came in right at the peak of the housing market, and spent the first 3 years of my life focused on macro, really understanding all the drivers of all of that, and so have become pretty well versed in just how to evaluate all of that, which it's sometimes I forget because it's so second nature, but sometimes I forget it's not that obvious. And so just, but for us, we know which questions to ask. We know where to find the data. We know how to research it and get comfortable kind of what's going on in terms of the ultimate underlying drivers for those businesses.
So one of the key criteria would be, in a local market, that there's obviously that there's building tailwinds, that there's going to be active building for the next cycle, and you're investing ahead of that or along with that. That would be kind of a red flag if it weren't there.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, so you start from that, in other words.
Yeah, we start from the macro, what's going on, what are the macro dynamics going on here, right?
Yeah.
If there are some headwinds, what are we know which headwinds to identify. Why can this company mitigate those headwinds, right? Maybe they have lower market share and there's a clear avenue for growth because they've been production constrained, whatever it may be. But are there ways to mitigate those where we think those may be challenges? And then that was a big reason for what we love about the independent sponsor is it provide that independent sponsor model, because it provides the flexibility for us to invest in these cycles, because we're not beholden to that traditional fund life. You only have a certain amount of years that you can have this capital allocated for. So the beauty of this model is that we're not going to get stuck, trying to sell a business in an opportune time.
And what is the understanding of your LPs that you can stay in an investment if you need to wait out a cycle? How does that look different than traditional private equity?
So traditional private equity, if you go raise a fund, that's going to be a 10-year fund cycle. Right. You're typically deploying that capital within the first 5 years. So if you're buying a business in that year 4, year 5 period, you've got a 5-year period, right, to get in and out of that business. Otherwise, you're going to have pretty complicated decisions to make. If, as the independent sponsor model, if we make an investment at that year 4, 5 benchmark, we're restarting the clock. That's new capital coming in, right? We're not set to having to return that capital within a certain time period. So we're not, we won't be forced to make unnatural decisions that aren't the right decisions for the business because we need to do it for the fund.
To go back one step, cyclical industry, how do you raise capital from investors? Are these the same investors, but you pitch them better than others? Or is it a new set of investors?
It's the same investors. They trust us, right? We are the subject matter experts. We are the domain experts. And I think we are able to see things because of that expertise, because of the industry network we're bringing into it. We look to really surround ourselves with, honestly, kind of overqualified boards. And these are all folks that have spent time in the industry. And so we just bring a lot of expertise to the table that brings them comfort that this is a good investment opportunity. And with each of our deals, we like to set aside usually about, call it 10% of that capital to give an opportunity for our industry network to invest. These are CEOs, CFOs, business owners, all within the building products industry that we've known for a long time. And so when we have a new deal and we're out looking for capital for that deal, we're talking with that group, and we're usually rounding up capital from them pretty quickly of that, they can look at it and be like, yes, where do I sign? And so as we're out raising for those kind of larger anchor investors, giving them a glimpse of, hey, here's folks within the industry that have looked at this, that like it, that also brings additional comfort. So it's just, again, that kind of compounding effect of this ability to leverage our industry network from a due diligence perspective. Again, to get through due diligence faster, we're able to kind of back channel with our partners on businesses that we're looking at to understand what's the strength of the brand. Have you heard of this company? What do you think about it? We've gotten some pretty interesting data from CEOs who some of the businesses that we may have been looking at were suppliers to that company, and they say, okay, yeah, we're buying this much from this company. And oh, by the way, of this category has been growing, faster than, there's real tailwinds to that specific niche that product is serving. So we're able to diligence differently. Again, which brings confidence. We obviously put all that into a presentation and share those thoughts with our investors. And so I think when we have those conversations with the investors, and we've been fortunate enough to have some repeat investors in our deals, they see the real expertise that we bring, and they love that we specialize. That's probably the most consistent feedback as we meet new relationships and look to develop those relationships with capital partners is, if we are ever to do a deal in building products, it's going to be with you guys. That is a pretty consistent line we get from folks. And, you guys are doing something right. We love that you specialize. This is very different. And so, I think the strategy is certainly resonating with the investor community. And then, obviously our ability to kind of source deals out of processes, to me, suggests our strategy is also working with sellers as well.
Ben, one thing that you'd also said about your industry expertise is that you have a sense of who a strategic buyer or buyers could be for a target that you're evaluating. A buyer after, once you've been owners, who you would then exit the business to, and that you actually, it's one of your criteria. You need to be able to articulate very clearly, very specifically, who a strategic buyer for a target you're evaluating would be. And that goes beyond, of course, most sponsors will say, we'll have some sort of exit vision or exit plan, and they'll have a sense of what demand could be for an asset they're evaluating. But in your case, you actually might put names to this. And like I said, it's actually one of your key criteria, as I understand it. Please say more about that.
Yeah. I mean, these are buyers that potentially could have been relationships of ours when we were doing investment banking. We could know the leadership of that and have, during our investment banking days, had called on them and kind of understand fundamentally what their M&A and growth strategies are. They could be sidelined for any of particular reasons of not being able to do M&A, and we know that they would love to own this instance. They could be facing internal issues that could be sidelining them from doing M&A. There's just obviously always different dynamics that we kind of have that level of insight into those strategic buyers. Of they may not have been brought into the process if there was a process, right? And even known about the business, and we know in the back of in that banker may not know that they would be a good buyer, right? So there's just a lot of different things that could be going on, and of folks that we know should be the long-term best owners of this business. And so being able to speak specifically to those buyers and speak to the rationale as to why they either want to get into this category or why they specifically would want to own the specific business that we're looking at. We can talk very intelligently about that, and it's very clear that we're not BS in the matter, right? And so having that confidence around what the exit should look like and could potentially look like, I think just further cements the story as we look at the overall investment strategy.
So where other independent sponsors, when they are diligencing a deal early stage, they will socialize the concept maybe with some of their investors to build confidence around entering the deal. You guys are actually going 5 years ahead in time, and at least conceptually, because you can't reveal or wouldn't want to reveal the target company, but you can go to the strategic buyers 5 years from now and say, hey, conceptually, a target like this, would you be interested in that? And have intelligent conversations about that before you even enter a deal.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And after, usually pretty shortly after we announce the deal, we'll reach out to them and chat with them and understand kind of where their mindset is, and usually talk to all who we think the likely strategic buyers are. Again, Not all, right? But there's a good chunk that we just know personally or can get access to the leadership pretty quickly. And that kind of helps kind of shape our strategy as well, right? If we think they're going to be the best owners of the business, we know what they look for in businesses that they want to acquire. And so as we think about our 5-year plan of, what we want to accomplish in our investment period, like, mitigating some of those kind of yellow flags that we think may be issues for those buyers, will be a part of that discussion.
You mean incorporate the feedback you get from them both before and after you close your target and effectively build a roadmap out of that?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I mean, we're, at the end of the day, I mean, just take a step back, right? At the end of the day, we're about developing a strategy, a growth strategy for the company that is going to deliver long-term value and success for the company. So I just want to be crystal clear on that point. But, as we think about that exit, right, developing a strategy that best positions for that exit as well is an important piece of that conversation.
Ben, pivoting away a little bit from how you think about deals to the inception of Blue Ridge, and you built your team before going out and finding your first deal?
Yeah. When we were defining our strategy of what we wanted Blue Ridge to be, our vision for the business, where we wanted, what our goals were for the first 18 months, what our long-term vision for the business was 5 years from now. My partner Casey and I spent a lot of time around that, and we wanted to build something, and not there's kind of multiple different ways to be an independent sponsor. Some folks want to kind of manage one portfolio, maybe two portfolio companies at a time. Our view was to manage somewhere between 6 and 8 at a time, and really build what we would call as the premier building products private equity firm in the lower middle market. That was our vision. And so to do that, you need a team. And so we made the decision that, hey, you and I forgo a salary for the foreseeable future. Let's go invest in the team. And as we build that team, that will build credibility for us. It'll build credibility in the eyes of the seller, right? To see that, hey, we have a team that we're going to dedicate to helping the company, and partnering with them to execute on the strategy. And then with our investors, they like to see that we're allocating, real resources and time and effort, because as to be stewards for their investment. So it was really important for us to kind of go out and build that team, invest in that team ahead of looking to pay ourselves a salary. So I think we're kind of focused more on the long term.
Can you give us big picture what the team members were that you felt you needed to start with? What did this team look like? Yeah,
we the first hire we made was a VP that we brought on the team. Well, I'm going to have to actually take a step back. So we were actually kind of diligencing a deal. We hadn't closed. We were diligencing a deal, and we had an old colleague of Casey and mine that was in business school at the time, and asked if he wanted to kind of intern while he was in business school. They said, "Hey, you've got a lot of free time, right? We've got this deal. We'd love some extra help." And so he was gracious enough to help us, and so he was kind of probably our first informal addition to the team, and did a tremendous job. And he has actually since joined our team full time after he graduated business school. But our first actual hire was a VP that had worked with Casey at Goldman, and then we quickly hired an associate behind that within that kind of first summer of 22, and we closed our first deal at the end of the summer of 22. So we brought on a VP and associate, and then we have since now built the team to 6 of us, including Casey and I. So we've added another VP and associate, and now we're starting to kind of think through, what 2025 looks like, and where we want to invest in the team. Do we look to invest in kind of a more ops kind of focus? You see a lot of folks kind of going down that path of bringing some of the operational chops in-house and to help the portfolio companies go down that path. So those are kind of conversations we're having real time.
So how long did you end up going without a salary?
We went 18-ish months. It was painful, but coming into this, we were giving ourselves 18 months to do our first deal, and we did our first deal within 6. And did our second deal within 9 months. So I was pretty happy about that. But thought process is I was potentially going to be foregoing a salary for 18 months to begin with, and so we just, again, as those management fees came in, put all that into continuing to just invest.
Because normally for a sponsor, the first deal you close, the first management fee you get, this is finally your break. You have some recurring revenue. You're able to pay your bills, pay your mortgage, have some standard of living there. But in your case, you forfeited that first deal and the management fee into hiring a team. Did it pay off? Where would you be today if you hadn't, gone away?
We couldn't. Yes, it's it was definitely an interesting conversation, and took a bit to get there. My wife was pregnant with our second child at the time, so that was an interesting conversation to have. Hey, going to do this, not going to take a salary for a bit. Fortunately, had done investment banking for 13 years, had been successful there. So able to build up a little bit of nest egg, to take kind of a leap of faith and take this risk. Casey as well, had been in investment banking for a long time. So he was fortunate enough to be in a similar position. It's definitely stressful, but the best decision we could have made. I couldn't be happier with the team that we have. It really frees up a lot of time for us to really, again, focus on strategy. And as a team, we're able to really bring resources and thought and help problem solve. And ultimately, help our companies on a week in and week out basis. That if it was just Casey and I, we wouldn't have the time to be able to do what we're doing. So I think you have to have a team. If I have a piece of advice, as I talk to sponsors, independent folks that are thinking about getting in the independent sponsor world, the advice I normally give is first, find a partner. Don't go about it yourself. It can get lonely pretty quickly. But I would encourage them to at least find a partner first and go about that way. And then kind of challenge them to think about if they're in a position to invest in a team, just the benefits that brings in terms of being able to leverage your time to continue to build whatever your ultimate goals are.
And so the calculus would be, if I'm considering this path, and let's say I have a partner and we have some nest egg, basically be paying a 1 or 2 person team out of our own pockets, with the idea that we're going to race toward finding that first deal, hopefully in 18 months or less, and then that will then provide some breathing room. Obviously, everybody be different, but that would be kind of a loose template, maybe.
Yeah, so the nuance here is we had some irons in the fire when we were kind of getting started.
Yeah.
And so we had quite a bit of confidence in our ability to get a deal done. And so when we actually pulled the trigger on that first hire, we kind of knew that, right? Because hearing you say that back, Will, I would say, hey, well, you don't, you want to be like eyes wide open, right? With that person coming on board, you don't want to hire someone to then, if it doesn't work out, that you're having to make some tough decisions and putting that person in an unfair spot. And, we were certainly had those conversations with the first couple folks of, this is entrepreneurial. There's risk here. Make sure make sure they understood what they were getting into, which they did. But we were also kind of knee deep in diligence on a deal that we had high conviction that we were going to be able to close.
Yep.
So the conviction from you came not only from having some irons in the fire, but some of your deals have been a little bit on the bigger side too, right?
Yeah. The first deal we did was Matthews Edge Sand. That was a smaller deal, kind of past the hat, sub $10 million deal. But we were also at the same time working on this first larger deal, Artistic Paver, which was on its way to doing about 10 million of EBITDA at the time. And so we knew kind of the sense of the scale that we'd be getting into at that point in time. And since, I think our strategy is, we talk about doing north of 5 million of EBITDA. I think our sweet spot is in that kind of 10 to 20 million of EBITDA, which is where kind of the other two platforms that we've done have been in that range.
And then for management fee, typically what we see is 5% of EBITDA with a floor of maybe 200 or 250K and maybe a ceiling of 750 or even $1 million. That's fairly standard from what we see and we see in the industry. And so as you had developed a pipeline, you could reverse engineer the math and say, we can afford this kind of team if we close one or two of these deals.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's right. And the numbers you threw out there are pretty consistent with how we approached it. I think, there's the McGuire Woods, that InPen sponsor study they put out has great data points. And I think it's just a conversation with the investors on when you set those floor and caps, the min and the max, right? Needing to have a clear understanding of what those management fees are going towards, right? If it's going into your pockets and not going into investing into resources, that's a much harder conversation to have. And so for us, as we set those mins and max, right, clearly showing one, having already done it, investing in the team and having the team, like, hey, we've got to pay these folks, but kind of showing the roadmap of where we want to be helped us in those conversations.
Ben, after working in banking for 13 years, you actually had a quick stint working for another independent sponsor as a director of business development. So between being a banker and a director of business development, and now an independent sponsor yourself, you've done your fair share of sourcing and relationship building. What are your best practices on this?
Yeah, I think it's the latter of what you talked about, right? It's the relationship management. My entire career has been in relationship management. Was when I was building products, investment banking side of things, right? Calling on CEOs, CFOs, again, business owners. That was all about creating trust and demonstrating value. Moving into when I moved into lower middle market private equity into a business development role, I saw that kind of largely as an extension of what I was doing, which was going out and building relationships with banks and thought leaders in the industry and business owners, and so kind of just continuing to build on that success, and so I think it's largely just kind of what I'm doing today. I think those same skills apply to running Blue Ridge, where for us, relationships are at the core of everything we do. In the partnerships that we take, in the founder family-owned businesses that we look at, to where those founders or family owners continue to hold stake, you got to build that trust with them.
But how do you go about doing that? So on a yearly basis, do you have a CRM with a lot of contacts in there? And do you parse them out throughout the year and say, we've done so and so many email touch points, it's time for me to call this person, it's been 6 months since last time?
I have, and we can and will. I did that a lot, and definitely have some good ideas there. We have been fortunate enough at Blue Ridge that our goal is to do kind of 1 to 2 deals a year. That we've been able to, kind of that next deal. We close a deal, and then within 3-4 months, we kind of are on to the new one. So we've never really had to turn on that sourcing engine, or folks within our industry network will give us leads that we'll follow up on, or we'll have an kind of investment thesis driven piece where we'll kind of take that out and go find businesses and kind of do some of that cold calling work. So in terms of like casting that super wide net where you're going, where you have a list of which I do, of 2,000 business brokers and investment bankers, and just going down that email campaign path. We have not necessarily done that at Blue Ridge, but something we probably will and should do at some point in the future. We just haven't had to do that. For us, it's interesting because, right, being building products focused, getting into PitchBook and Cap IQ, right, and having some portfolio investments, and having those buzzwords or the sectors identified of what categories you're interested, right, when those bankers or brokers or whomever are going to make their buyers list, we naturally pop up. So it's shocking how many brokers reach out to us without having necessarily reached out to them in the past.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in general, there is a playbook for outbound lead generation, but in your case, you are so industry focused that in itself has become a brand that creates inbound, which is even better. And with your current scale and resources, that's been plenty of you to work out of.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. Yeah, it's really interesting. And again, part of the thesis coming into this was that's going to have a multiplying effect over time, right? As we add to the portfolio, as our brand continues to build, that inbound is only going to increase.
Great, Ben. Well, one thing that you, as it seems many of the independent sponsors who are more mature, further down the path, have been successful, start contemplating is whether they continue going deal by deal or they become proper private equity and raise a fund. And this is something that you guys are exploring internally as well, or have already decided?
I always phrase it as, where do we want to be when we grow up? We get asked this question all the time. And one day we're in the camp of, hey, we're going to go out and raise the fund. The other day is, boy, if we can keep doing what we're doing in the independent sponsor world, why would we do it? So it's a tough question. I don't have a great answer. If anyone has got this hybrid approach that brings this kind of certainty of funding that a committed fund has, but is able to balance that with the flexibility of doing a deal by deal basis, would definitely welcome opening any thoughts there. What I really like about the independent sponsor model and raising capital specifically on a deal by deal basis is we are able to bring strategic capital to that deal. And I think that's a really important point to make, is that we're kind of able to hand select the investors that we're bringing into this that will have an angle beyond just providing money. One of our deals, one of the anchor investors, they own a building products business. It's not a direct competitor. It kind of competes tangentially, but with what we're doing. But they've been a great sounding board for us as we talk about strategy and where we want to go, and sharing insights on what they see. So it's just examples like that where we're able to really handpick that capital and make it more strategic, ultimately just to drive the value.
Well, it seems like one of the things that raising a fund would solve for is the speed that you can then deploy the capital and make a deal happen. But it seems like you actually, because of this industry focus, have kind of solved for that in a different way. Maybe you can't stroke a check quite as quickly as if you were sitting on the dry powder, but you, because of your brand, which is going to, the value of which is going to compound over time, because of your industry connections, because of your track record, it seems like you probably could raise for a deal faster than your average independent sponsor. And so maybe having dry powder sitting around is less valuable to you. You've solved it in a different way. Or do I overstate it?
Yes. I think it's
Yes,
not quite that easy.
it.
I wish it wasn't quite that easy. I mean, we're in a cyclical industry, so it is not, it's not clear cutter. We've got to spend a lot of time, really helping tell that story of why we're able to do it really well. But there is certainly a story to be told, and that story is not, that investment opportunity is not for everyone. So we spend a lot of time up front having those conversations early, and getting a sense of, okay, yeah, we feel really good that we're going to be able to do this if we get it under LOI. And again, we're only less than 3 years into this too, so we're still building those relationships. We've built some incredible relationships so far, but we're still building relationships, and folks are still getting to know who we are, and kind of see the types of deals that we're looking at, and see the consistency in the types of deals that we're looking at in terms of how it aligns with the strategy that we say we're going to do. And so, our network of capital providers is expanding, every year, which is awesome. And we've been fortunate enough to be able to raise capital without issue on any of our deals. But it is by no means a pick up the phone call and they're like, yeah, I'll write you the check for $15 million, no problem.
One of the other reasons that we've heard some sponsors talk about wanting to raise a fund is actually to provide a little bit more of a path for their team members, where as an independent sponsor going deal by deal, maybe things feel a little bit looser. But if you raise a fund and there's basically a 10-year well laid out path, team members who are contemplating building a career there with you might feel that there's kind of more of a path there, more certainty. Is that something that resonates?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that for sure resonating. Of just it's more stability. Like
right.
Raising a fund is more stability, and for the team, for everyone. At the same time, independent sponsor is a little bit more entrepreneurial. It feels like a little bit more cavalier, and so I think that drives some excitement. And so you can certainly find the right side. I just feel incredibly blessed with the team that we have, and that we've been able to bring on board. And these are really high caliber folks that we've been able to bring on. And the independent sponsor has never really been the issue. And I think since we have close to 100 million of equity at work, that I think that brings a lot of natural stability to that fundamental question you're asking.
Ben, was there anything that you wanted to share with the independent sponsor community out there, other independent sponsors, aspiring independent sponsors that we didn't get to?
Yeah. Well, first off, again, thanks so much for having me. For folks out there that are listening to this, that are thinking about getting into, I'm biased, but I think finding this industry, the independent sponsor industry, I think is becoming more specialized. I think the lower middle market in general is becoming more specialized. And so just would strongly encourage folks that are thinking about getting into it to really think about their strategy, think about what their investment thesis is, why are they different, and really hone in on that and be consistent and true to that. So that would be, if I could give advice, that's what I would say.
Fantastic. Great, Ben. Well, if people want to reach out to you, see what you're doing at Blue Ridge, what are ways they can do that? What's the URL? How are you reachable?
Yeah, the URL is blueridge-cc.com. Our contact information is on there for the team. My email is ben@blueridge-cc.com. So feel free to reach out directly, and always happy. When Casey and I were setting out to do this, there were folks that we talked to that kind of have been there and gave us some great advice and mentored along the way. So I'm very much in the camp of putting that back into the community as well. We've still got a lot to learn. Again, we're only 3 years into this. Certainly feels like we're doing something that's right. But I always also, if anyone just wants to talk shop, would welcome that as well, because I am very much still learning. Nicholas, you've been a great person to kind of talk through ideas with as well on all this stuff.
We didn't say that we were former neighbors in Dallas a few years ago, so we would attend all of these kids events.
And you got an HVAC business that we're going to figure out how to partner on at some point too.
That's right. Now, I was wondering, as Will was asking that question about reaching out to you, if another sponsor has a building products deal that is notoriously difficult for them to close on because of the cyclicality, but it's a good quality company, can they reach out to you with this deal? And do you provide a closing fee or referral fee or anything in that direction if somebody brings you that kind of value?
Yeah. The short answer is, would love to. Always open to having a conversation. We haven't spent much time looking at things through that lens, but I'm all about putting good karma into the world. So if I can be helpful, if they're struggling, it's in the building products industry, and they're like, hey, do you know capital providers that may be interested? Always happy to be a helping hand. And, if there's a way for if it's really interesting for Blue Ridge and there's a way for us to figure out a way to partner, certainly all ears on that side as well.
Fantastic, Ben. Well, we were thrilled to have you on Meeting of the Minds for season 1. Over 100 million deployed in under 3 years. Really, you're a lot of progress, even though you claim to be new at this. So thank you very much for coming on and talking with Nicholas and me about what you guys are up to. Congratulations on it.
Thank you, guys. This has been a blast. Love it. Love what you guys are doing. Was awesome to kind of hear the story of kind of what y'all are doing in the background as well on the investing side as well. So looking forward to keeping the conversation going.
Hope you enjoyed that interview. For more like it, subscribe to Meeting of the Minds wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. And check out Minds Capital, where Nicholas and I are partners alongside Max Lummis. Minds Capital invests equity in independent sponsored deals. So if you're a sponsor with a deal under LOI, please visit mindscapital.co to start a conversation. There's also an investor tab on our website with information about partnership opportunities and future fundraisers. See you in the next episode.